Good morning, everybody joining us today. Welcome to our Lightning Web Components webinar series. Welcome to episode 1 and introduction. My name is Shashank. I lead the developer relations initiatives for Salesforce for Asia Pacific and India. And I'm joined today by two great speakers, Nirankush Panchbai, who is VP Product Management on the Lightning Web Components team. Thank you so much, Nirankush, for joining us. And we also have Satya, who is a senior developer evangelist, who is also going to share us his knowledge on Lightning Web Components. So, welcome, Kush.
Thank you, Shashank. Really awesome to be here. I'm super psyched about talking about LWC with everyone today.
And welcome, Satya.
Yeah, thank you, Shashank. I'm excited and ready to start things.
All right, we're ready to get going into things. Before that, let me tell you that we might make some forward-looking statements about features that are not yet generally available, just in case. So please don't make any buying decisions based on what we're going to talk about today. Right. With that, let me tell you that we're all for social, and you can always tweet us on our Twitter handle at Salesforce Devs, our Facebook and LinkedIn pages as Salesforce Developers, and you can also find all our amazing content, video content on our YouTube channel, which is again called Salesforce Developers. And please also note that this webinar is recorded. It will be recorded, and post the webinar, we will post the recording on the same URL that you used to register for this webinar. We also are going to post slides for the webinar as well, so watch out for that. And let me just give you a few more housekeeping information where one of the most important things is this is a live webinar and you actually get an opportunity to ask questions as you get them. So feel free to post your questions inside the questions tab, inside GoToWebinar, and then what we'll do is towards the end, we'll collect all these questions and answer as many as possible. So you don't have to wait till the end to ask your questions. You can keep asking. And towards the end of the Q&A section, we're going to address as many as possible. And if we are not able to get to your questions, you can always feel free to head to our developer forums and post your questions there, where our community is going to answer them. With that, let me just give you a high-level brief of the agenda for today, where we're going to talk about Lightning Web Components, what are they and why we're doing them. We're also going to talk about the sample gallery, component library, and playground, some amazing resources for you to get started, and about base Lightning components and what are the tools that you need as a developer to build Lightning Web Components. And we'll see demos for all of them. I hear Kush and Satya has some great content for us today. So with that, let me hand over to Kush. Over to you.
Thanks, Shashank. So Lightning Web Components is the new programming model which we have come up for Lightning. It's based on modern web standards. The three important things which we want you all to take away from this webinar is that it's built for enhanced productivity. Since we are betting on modern standards like ES6, ES7, custom elements, modules, templates, like we are completely betting on the modern standards, and that's why you would see that the productivity will be enhanced. It's also built for performance because now you're offloading all the work to the browser and the JavaScript engine of the browser. There is nothing proprietary happening in the JavaScript layer, so we are not writing fat polyfills. Another very important thing for us when we were coming up with LWC was that it should have perfect interoperability with Aura. Like Aura and LWC, we call it as the perfect marriage. They talk to each other, events flow seamless, and they are living in a single page perfectly. So we are very proud of the compatibility, and that is one thing which we want you all to take away. Moving to since we are doing a lot of roadshow, a lot of people are asking like, hey, why are we coming up with LWC? I think for that, we need to go back to 2014 and start understanding what has happened in the web over the last 5 years. This is the 2014 web stack. You would see that the web was not innovating or evolving at a rapid pace. All the features which a framework would require from a platform, web was not providing. So a component model, templatizing it, writing modules, writing language extensions, everything was done by a framework and not by the platform which the web provided. You would see around the same time in 2014 lot of frameworks came in. React came in, Angular came in, Aura came in. Like the reason we came up with these frameworks is because we were filling holes which the platform was not giving us. This creates fragmentation because now you have multiple frameworks kind of doing the same thing in their own languages. These components, when they are written in those languages, are not interoperable. You cannot take a React component, bring it to Aura or vice versa. You cannot take an Angular component, take it to React. Skills are also not transferable. Like if you are a React developer, you are essentially a React language developer. You have understood that language, you have understood that concept. Like tomorrow, you cannot go to Angular and start coding day zero. Same with Aura. Like if you're an Aura developer, you completely understand the Aura stack, but you cannot move from Aura to React day zero. This makes it really hard to find resources. Like people who have these expertise are niche. So finding resources is super hard. And the other important thing which we briefly touched in the previous slide, framework abstractions are slow. Think about it. Like you have written all these concepts in JavaScript. Now you have a very fat JavaScript. Now the first thing what happens is like the browser needs to download that JavaScript, needs to parse it, needs to compile it, then spit out DOM objects, then spit out CSS boxes, and then finally render it on the screen. This entire cycle is synchronous. That is, so the best thing for a web developer is to make sure that the JavaScript which you're writing is not a fat polyfill, but is super optimized. And that is what we are leaning towards with LWC. Let's look at what has happened in the last 5 years. This is a great graph which we have like plotted. And one thing you would notice is around the same time in 2014, you would see a hockey stick innovation happening in the web platform. This is the time when Salesforce, Facebook, and all these web companies went back to W3C, ECMAScript 9, TC39, and started talking about the scenarios which we care about. We started helping these standard communities to evolve the standards so that web is not a neglected platform, but an equal platform compared to all native solutions you have. That's why you would see this hockey stick development where all the awesome features like modules, promises, decorators, web components started coming into specifications and browsers started developing those. Let's take a look at like what has happened in the last 4 years looking at our same stack. So you would see with all the innovations and the web standards, Orange has increased a lot. All the proprietary things which the framework had to do now are part of the web platform. Templates, custom elements, shadow DOMs, decorators. Now the framework doesn't do all this heavy lifting in the framework because all of these things are provided by the web platform, which is super rich. Like I am very passionate about the web platform because I think about it as the only platform which is interoperable across all devices, all form factors, and all OSs. And that is the beauty of the web, because if you're writing for the web, you can take your content as a developer anywhere, right from an iPhone or an Android to a desktop machine to a Mac to a Linux. Let's take a look like how Salesforce is using this 2019 web stack and coming up with the new programming model LWC. So you would see here that the only thing which we do is the secret sauce of Salesforce. We are adding the secret sauce of Locker, which helps with security. We are coming up with Lightning Data Service, which is going to help you access the metadata and the data and the power of Salesforce. And we also have all the base Lightning components which you had with Aura, now available with LWC. So that's the beauty of this web stack, because now if you compare the 2014 and the 2019 web stack, you would see that the fat JavaScript layer has reduced a lot. and now all the work is offloaded to the browser. Like we talked about the drawbacks, this is the benefit slides, and like more standards, less proprietary. That means like there is a common component model. We are writing our entire blueprints in web components. It's vanilla web components. You can take that syntax, take those blueprints anywhere. The skills are also transferable because essentially you're not learning anything proprietary. It's modern JavaScript. You're learning the core concepts of ES6, ES7. You're learning the concepts of web components, and all these awesome things are transferable skills, nothing proprietary. The beauty of LWC and web components is that it has a very easier ramp up for developers compared to any proprietary standard, because there is nothing proprietary we are doing here. Everything is a web standard. One of the awesome things which I find about LWC is whenever I'm in doubt and I need to search anything and I Google it, like MDN is the top link. Stack Overflow has a great answers. I sometimes find answers on Quora. That was not the case when we were in the Aura world. Everything has to come from the Salesforce community. Although we have a very vibrant and awesome, rich community, LWC opens the world to us. Now we can go to Google, go to MDN, and get all the answers which we have questions for. And like I have been talking about, LWC is awesome for performance. Like I would really encourage you guys to write the same scenario you have written in Aura in LWC and figure out the performance. Like in some cases, we have seen like 10x performance improvements, which is super awesome to see, like as a product manager working on this.
Yeah, this is all great. So what we did in 2014 was what we needed to do then.
Yes.
But what it looks like what we're doing in 2019 is what is needed for the future.
Yes.
And this is amazing stuff. But let's also address the elephant in the room.
Right.
The most popular question: what will happen to Aura now? Is it going away, or is it going to be happy siblings with LWC? How is that going to look like from now?
Great question, Shashank. This is a very dear question to all of us inside of Salesforce too. And when we started on this LWC journey, we wanted to make sure that Aura and LWC coexist. That's why here on this slide, you would see that irrespective of the stack, like even though there is more orange on the LWC side and more blue on the Aura side, the secret sauce we have about security, Lightning data service, based Lightning components is common. We have a really awesome communication mechanism where we are converting the W3C DOM events, which you see in a standard LWC component, to the proprietary events which Aura understands. And that's the beauty of it. Like when Aura is sending events to a LWC component, we are converting those proprietary Aura events to standard modern JavaScript events so that now LWC starts understanding that. So we have done a lot of hard work in making sure that Aura and LWC work together. We don't think that Aura to LWC is a migration journey. Aura to LWC is just evolving. Like you said, we are evolving with the web standards. The 2014 web stack was not too innovative. That's why we had to come up with our own models in Aura so that we could take this forward. But now with 2019, we have an awesome web stack in the platform. So we are using that web platform and enriching it more so that we can innovate at a very faster cadence.
Yeah, this is all amazing. But now I can't wait to see how a simple LWC would look and feel. So Satya, can you please help us understand more on that front?
Definitely, Shashank. For a developer who would have already worked on Aura development, Aura programming model, he might be more concerned about what would be my set of files when I develop a Lightning web component, right? Because we know that when we develop using the Aura programming model, we have used a bundle of 8 files. So we need to know about what each file in fact does, right? But with Lightning Web Components, I can see that we need not maintain a bundle of 8 files there. Rather, we can stick to the web standards, as Kush was telling earlier. So we can stick to the web standards, and we can develop our web components just by using the HTML and JavaScript file. Right. So if you see this anatomy, you can see that we have a HTML file where you can define the markup of your Lightning web component, and then you have a JavaScript file just like any other web development, where in a class you can write the component code in a JavaScript class, right? But we added a third file, which I'll call it as a meta file, which you can use to define the configuration about how you want to deploy your Lightning web component on the Salesforce org. Okay, but for that matter, if you want to add some CSS, right, or you want to add your own styling, then it also supports the CSS file. So you can add the CSS file there. And if you want to add more SVG, or if you want to add your own icon there, then you can also add the SVG file.
Okay, looks like there are much fewer mandatory files. There's just a JavaScript file and metadata file that is needed for Salesforce to understand. This is LWC, and HTML if you want to show markup, and CSS if you want to show style, and everything is like if you want to do that.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, that's pretty simple and straightforward for me, if you ask. Now, can you show us how it feels?
Definitely. So I'll show a quick overview of how a Lightning web component looks like. So here I have created my very first Lightning web component, in which case it has created a HTML file for me and a JavaScript file. This HTML file, you'll have to name it in the camel case, right? So that it will be converted into the kebab case when it is rendered in the browser as a HTML file. Now you can see that your Lightning web component is not just rendered like a Lightning web component, but rather it is rendered like an element in the HTML file. So it converts into the kebab case, and you can easily identify your element in the browser. And if you want to even debug or use the developer tools in the browser, you can do so there. So what this HTML file has is simply a template tag within which you are going to write the markup. And then we also defined a JavaScript file, and this file has at least 2 important statements. One import statement, the other one is the export statement. Import statement is for importing a module, a ECMAScript module, ES6 module into your component. So here we are trying to build a Lightning web component, a Lightning element basically, which is just like your HTML element. So we are importing it as a module into our file, and then we are extending that element and creating our own component, right? We are creating a class there within which you can write your code. Once you write your code, you can export your module so that someone else who wants to use the Lightning web component, he can use it. And also if you want to use it in the Lightning app builder, you can do so. And the third important file, like these are the 2 files you can see which are common in any web development, right? So we have a third file, which is the meta file, in which we are going to define the configuration which is required to deploy it into the Salesforce org. So here you have an API version for which we are building the Lightning web component there, and we also have a tag is exposed, which if set to true, this component will be readily available for use to use in your Lightning app builder. Okay, so these are the 3 important files, Shashank. And as I said earlier, if you want to use the CSS file or you want to use an SVG file, you are free to do so.
Yeah, it looks like there's a lot of proprietary stuff that we're doing in Aura. It was looking as its own programming language. And recently I've been trying my hands on modern JavaScript and web and stuff like that. And this looks very familiar, if you ask me at least. Right. So there are a lot more other resources that we are providing to our developers, right? Like the component library, the playground, which is one of my favorite things that I've seen in recent times, base components and stuff. So Kush, can you please throw some light on some of these things?
Yes, please. Like you, playground is also one of my favorite things. I don't know, like, how many of you use component library? For me, it is one of the best resources to go and learn anything about Lightning development, right? Like you have very rich examples of all the base components there, the reference documentation is there, playground is there. So let's take a quick spin on the component library, and then I can talk about the new features we have released this release.
Sounds good.
So this is our familiar component library. You would see we have added a couple of more tabs here. The component reference is where you will get all the components. You can filter the components based on LWC and Aura, and it will clearly help you identify the deprecated components too. In the developer guide section, you can go and see extensive documentation around LWC, like really awesome sections like how do I communicate with events, how can Locker work with LWC, how can I work with Salesforce data, what about Aura coexistence. So a lot of questions which we already anticipate people asking, we have already written documentation for it, so that like in your own time, you can go to this reference documentation and learn about it. Like we have awesome Locker console, which tells you what APIs are supported and not. This helps you a lot when you're developing and want to understand what are the best security practices. The tool which is really new this time, and we are really proud, is Playground. If you guys have played with JS Fiddle or CodePen, this is JS Fiddle or CodePen++ for Salesforce. We built this for Salesforce so that you could do rapid prototyping, rapid learning, and that helps you learn LWC at a very faster cadence. Like you would see here, it's like a very intuitive UI where here you have the output of everything you're writing here. You have your CSS, HTML, and the JS files, the anatomy, which Satya just explained. Like I can edit it, and you would see that the on your right, it's updating on the fly. So this is a super awesome tool. One of the things which we have done is we have taken this tool everywhere where we could. And in the past, we have heard a lot of feedback that, hey, I love your base component examples, but I cannot edit them. Is there a way for me to edit it? And we have heard your feedback, and now you can. So here is a basic accordion. You all know, like in the past, like we had documentation, specification, and example. But now you can pop open this accordion example in Playground. You can edit it right here. Like I can make a small edit right here. LWC webinar. And you would see that it's updating on the fly. And that is the beauty of Playground. Like we have a lag of internet, but otherwise if you do it on your own screen, you would see that it's instantly updating and you don't even have to press run button, fly button. It's like hot reload. So this is the power of Playground. We really encourage you guys to like go to Playground and use Playground and give us feedback. One of the awesome things about LWC is all the 70 base components which you had with Aura, you have the same 70 plus base components already available with LWC. So you can see it, all those base components are right here. We also have added this cool button where you can say, I know accordion, I've used it in the past when I was writing an Aura component. So you can reference back to that Aura component and see, okay, this is how things were in Aura. And now go back to this LWC example again and see, okay, this is how I'm doing it in LWC. So lot of documentation and tooling stuff we have added to LWC. So let us know your feedback.
Wow, this is like powerful stuff where I can actually edit an example on the documentation page.
Completely new for Salesforce.
Yeah, even from my experience, at least I haven't seen it anywhere else.
Right.
So this is amazing. Okay, this Playground is a great tool, and I just get my hands dirty with a few things, and I'm all good. Now, what if I'm ready and I have to build something? So Satya, can you help us out understand how to build Lightning Web Components in our projects? Because now I heard it's actually generally available and it's production ready. With the last week's last version of the Spring release, it's available for everybody to use. So how do I use it in my projects as a developer?
Yeah. First thing, I would like to thank Kush on the very nice presentation of the component library and the playground. And I think you now realize like you can use the playground for quickly testing your Lightning Web Components. If you wanted to start writing Lightning Web Components, so that is the first place or the best place where you can start with, where you can write the web component and on the fly you can see the output as well there. Right? But if you want to learn more about how it is used in general real-time applications, then we have some sample projects which are already built, awesome projects built by the Trailhead team there. Most of the people who are watching this webinar today, I believe they already know about the sample gallery. There are new additions to the sample gallery with the Spring 19 release. The first one is the recipes sample app. So many of you would have already worked on sample app like Dreamhouse and other stuff in your Trailhead modules, and when you're trying it out. This recipes app is little different from the earlier sample apps. In this app, we have devised some examples, very good examples, which map to the real-time scenarios or use cases, which generally a developer will do on his day-to-day development life. Right. So if you are trying to find a solution for one of the things which you are currently doing, maybe you want to connect to the Apex controller, then you can probably get into the recipes app and see the exact Lightning Web Component implementation there and see how it works, and you can use it in your application there. So this is one sample app which has the complete set of examples, and then we have another app which is also completely built using the Lightning Web Components, which is called eBikes, wherein it is a retail store app. You can see all the use cases or scenarios related to the retail store live in implementation in this app there. And yeah, do you have, are you thinking like what happened to my earlier sample apps? Are they like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've been using those sample apps for my learnings and stuff. Any chance we can get them updated to work with LWC or something like that?
Yeah, in fact, those apps also are now available as LWC implementations.
So they're already done. They're already in LWC.
They're already in LWC.
But what about the Aura version of them?
Yeah, that's one important question which I love, because I know people are still using Aura there. So they may want to compare their Aura version of implementation with the LWC version. Then in that case, they do have the Aura version still available as Git repository. Now they can access the Git repository of the LWC version as well as the Aura version.
Okay, and I also keep hearing we should not be using the developer console for Lightning Web Components. Now I know developer console is favorite for a lot of developers for something quick, but at the same time it's not a great tool for something production wise, right? So why are we doing that, and what should we do to basically work with LWC if we don't have the developer console in the picture?
Yeah, developer console has been my favorite tool as well when I worked on Apex controllers or some Apex coding there and other stuff like query editor. But it has also some limitations. So it doesn't have a version control integration or some stuff like that. So now for LWC, I believe Salesforce DX, most of the people who are watching this webinar would have already done some Trailhead modules on Salesforce DX, or maybe they are using the Salesforce DX in their real-time environment. If so, that is fine. But if you are not using, still, it's very easy to use the Salesforce DX for your implementation, right? So we have Salesforce CLI, which needs to be installed on your local system. You can install the Salesforce CLI built on your terminal there. And once you install, you get many benefits from the Salesforce CLI, like you can integrate with the Git repository, and you can also use it for the like for debugging and a lot of stuff there. So it has a new extension, like it has a new additional features which are used for the Lightning Web Components there. So which includes like you can create the Lightning Web Components right from Salesforce CLI, and then you can also deploy it onto the Scratch orgs. So in Salesforce DX, we have the concept of Scratch orgs, which are temporary orgs on which we can deploy and work on it, right? So we can sync the changes from your local system, because you are working on the code on your local machine, right? You can sync these changes with your Scratch org there. And not only that, it also supports very easy way of deployment to the production. So you can also deploy your changes to the production, right? So this is one very important tool, Shashank, which we need to install to start working on the Lightning Web Components for more complex solutions. And again, so as Kush was showing in the playground. Playground is really interesting, and you can quickly see that whatever you are implementing in your playground, you can check how it looks like. You can do a prototyping basically of user interface. But there is one limitation with the playground. So playground cannot communicate with the Salesforce org, Salesforce data, right? You cannot get the Salesforce data to the playground. Rather, you can work with your user interface. But if you want to work with the Salesforce data and create more complex applications, then you'll have to go for Salesforce CLI. And there's one more important thing which generally any developer needs is an integrated development environment, right? So where you can develop your application, from where you can deploy your application and all. So for that matter, for Lightning Web Components, you can choose any of the IDEs of your choice. But we suggest you use VS Code, because VS Code comes with a lot of benefits. It is a very lightweight IDE, right, on which we can install the extensions. So Salesforce has already built extensions for the Lightning Web Components and other Salesforce implementation stuff. So it has an extension, Salesforce extension, in which you can do the Apex programming. It has the context help for the Apex programming, Visualforce, Aura components, and even Lightning Web Components now. Right. So with this VS Code, you get some. I'm just listing few of the benefits here. Like you have a project explorer where you can browse through your projects, and you have an integrated debugger with which you can debug your Lightning Web Component code. And not only that, you can also run your test cases, Apex test cases, right from your VS Code there. And then it is also integrated to Git, so that you can keep your source code safe in version control system, and you can retrieve it and deploy it. And it also has a feature of code completion, right? If you have already heard, Shashank, it is code snippets are the things which automatically populate the code for any, you can type for an element, and you can see that the code related to that element is populated there. So these are some of the few features which I'm able to tell now, but yeah, you can explore through and see it's more powerful than what I'm describing in today's webinar.
It's just tempting me and exciting me. I really want to see the demo now.
Yes.
So maybe can we take the recipes example and see how it works and stuff like that?
Definitely, definitely. So with this Salesforce CLI with the VS Code, I can say that you're going to get the best developer experience ever on Salesforce platform, right? So let's go and see how it works, how a recipe works, how a real Lightning Web Component works. For that, let me first show you the sample gallery, because I was talking a lot about the sample gallery there. So let's go to the sample gallery. So this is the sample gallery, which you can find in your developer.salesforce.com. There's a link. From there, it redirects to your Trailhead site, where you can find these applications. You have recipes and e-bike site application, which are completely built using the Lightning Web Components. And as I said earlier, you have Dreamhouse still there, and it is implemented in the Lightning Web Components, and you can easily navigate to its code from here. If you go there, and at the bottom you can see the README file. You have the installation instructions. This is same for whatever sample app you look for. And here you can see there is a link which takes you to the Aura version of the same application, Dreamhouse application. If you go back to the sample gallery, let me open the recipes app. So this is where this is the repository for the recipes app, which is already there in Git. As I said, VS Code, we are going to use the VS Code because we can get the repository from the Git there and deploy it locally very easily. So that I already done using Salesforce CLI and the VS Code there, and I've deployed this code just by following the instructions mentioned in my sample gallery here. So I've checked out the code, then I also deployed the code into one of my Scratch org. So I may want to show you that how it looks like once it is deployed. If you go here, so this is the Lightning Web Component application, which I just deployed just before the webinar, probably half an hour before webinar. So I say that it will not take more than 2 to 5 minutes to deploy your code here and start running. So this recipes app has different tabs. Each tab has examples, sample code, which is not more than 30 lines of code there. And you can try the example, you can see it working here, and then you can go back and see the code as well. If you want to see the code, you can see that for every sample app you see here, you have, except for the apps which I build myself, okay? So you can click on this view source, which is going to take you to the source Git repository of that particular component. If you want, you can check the components for Apex, and there are also components or examples implemented for different purposes. If you want to try out the event handling and see how a child component communicates with the parent component, then probably you can go to this tab and check these components. You want to see how one component talks to other component with the application events, then you can go to the PubSub and check how it works. Similarly, you can see how your Aura components can coexist with the Lightning Web components there. With that said, I would like to show one of the components from here and how the code looks like. So let's go to our Visual Studio Code, where I've already deployed my or checked out the code, and from where I've already deployed it to my application, right? Deployed into my org, Salesforce org. So to start with, this is the HTML file I was talking about, which has a template element here, and within this template element you can define your markup. So you have a lightning card. I've used a lightning card, and I've used any other HTML, just like any other HTML pages in any other development environments or any other technologies. I'm using these. I'm defining my HTML file in the same way, and you can see that I'm using a parameter here, which is dynamically populated from my JavaScript code, right? So for that, you can see that I'm using a object just like any other JavaScript object. So it's all about standards. So whatever app we are defining today in our Lightning Web component is all based on the modern web standards there. Now this greeting, I've defined it as a property in my JavaScript file. And as I said earlier, it has an import statement, it has an export statement, and I've written all my code within the block of this export statement, within the block of this class. So here we have defined a greeting property, right, which I've initialized to world. And can you see a special syntax here, Shashank?
Yes,
Yeah.
it says @track. What does that mean?
Right, it is called decorator. So if you want to give some special functionality to any of the things in your JavaScript file, you can import that as a ICMA module here and start using it. And what this decorator does is it does a one-way binding from your HTML page to the JavaScript. So if value is changed, your greeting will be populated there. Right now, if you see here, I have an input here. So when I type some input like hello APAC, so it is dynamically getting populated. So I have an input box, and then this is the output which you're seeing there. So if you go back here, so I have a Lightning input in which I'm accepting the input from the user into this greeting property, right? And then when it changes, when a user enters that value, I'm calling the handle change method of JavaScript. If you go here in the handle change method, I'll be getting the event because it is triggered by the event. So I'll be getting an event. From the event, I can get the value and save it into the greeting app there.
Now I see this dot that is mentioned before the property. It might be new for Salesforce developers. What does that mean?
Yeah, it might be familiar for other developers like Java, JavaScript developers, but yeah, this refers to the current object. So it gives the context. So it is going to add this value, it's going to assign this value to this parameter, this property.
And because it's been tracked, it's updated in the UI. That's how it works.
Exactly. Okay. And finally, we are showing that output here just by using this curly brace syntax. Right. So these are the two important files which we generally use to build any kind of Lightning Web components. Now you go through all the examples which I showed in my deployment there. So all the examples will be having the similar code, same HTML file, same JavaScript file, the code changes. One important file we talked about earlier also is the meta file. in which we are specifying the configuration. For this particular Lightning Web Component, you can see that I have specified the configuration using a element called targets here. So what this does is it is going to make this Lightning Web Component available only to the pages which I have defined in the targets. For instance, it is now available in the Flexi page, like Lightning app page, Lightning record page, and Lightning home page. Okay, this is how we tell the Salesforce org that this is available for different pages there.
Okay, this is all great, Satya. But my intuition is I might be from a Visualforce background, or I might be from an Aura background, and I'm looking at this and I'm wondering how do things map? How is the same thing done in 3 different ways, 2 or 3 different ways? How does it look in VF? How does it look in Aura? How does it look in LWC? What is the difference? What is similarities? So I would have loved it if we saw something like that.
Right, I was expecting this from you, Shashank, because most of the, even when I started up with the Lightning Web Components, I just wanted a quick comparison of what if I want to do the same thing in Aura, how would I have done? If I want to do the same thing in the very old Visualforce, how would I do that, right? So let me show you. I've created 3 windows here to show you the 3 different aspects, how it looks in your Lightning. At the bottom, you can see this is the Lightning Web Component code, which I just discussed about, and on the top right you can see the code for your Aura component, right? And on the left side you can see the code for your Visualforce page. So if you see here in the Lightning Web Component, I'm displaying the value using my curly braces, right, where greeting is a property. The same thing here I'm doing it using v.greeting, where v stands for view there. Right? So how do I get this greeting? It has to be defined well in advance as a Aura attribute. So I'm defining it as an Aura attribute there with the name greeting, so that this is accessible here in my output. And then how do I get the input? So here I'm getting the input in the curly braces here again, and I'm calling a on change. I'm calling a handle change event from my JavaScript. And if you see here, I'm using a Lightning input with the same v.greeting with a dynamic syntax, very old dynamic syntax. So this is more proprietary. But here we are using a syntax which is commonly used by any web developer using web standard there, right? That is the one fundamental difference. And this component, in fact, does the same thing what a Lightning Web Component does. Normally, when we build a Aura component, we tend to write the controller for that. And if required, we write the helpers and then whatnot. We write more of the things there. In this particular case, because Aura attribute is has a bidirectional binding nature, so we can use that attribute to do this bidirectional binding. So when we change the input, it automatically updates the output there, right?
Sounds great. Yeah, I think there is simplicity in this example here.
Yeah, and so if you compare it again with the Visualforce page, you can implement the same thing in Visualforce page using some additional concepts, basically because Visualforce page or the fields or the text or input there is not reactive by nature. So you'll have to do it by yourself, maybe by implementing a controller on the back end and stuff. So here I use the action function. There are other ways of doing it. Probably you can use some JavaScript there. But yeah, I have used action function so that whenever someone types an input in the input text field here, so the input, again, by using the dynamic syntax, I'm calling a method called dynamic binding, which I defined as an action function here, dynamic binding, which is mapped to my handle change method, which I've already defined in my hello controller. So what I'm doing here, so when someone types an input, so I'm calling the Apex method called handle change, right, by using the JavaScript again, right? So this is how we do it in the Visualforce pages. This is how we do it in the Visualforce pages. Now you got the comparison, Shashank, how it works in the Lightning Web Components and how it works in Aura component and also your Visualforce page.
Yeah, I mean, major difference I see is in Visualforce, it was never meant to be a client-side framework. It was being returned from the server. So I can understand there's a lot of stuff that was needed to make a client-heavy functionality like dynamically changing values and stuff difficult. So there's a lot of code there. So in Aura, technically the lines of code is probably lesser because you don't really need a controller in this situation.
Right.
You can put the attribute in the markup itself.
Right.
And it has two-way binding, so you can just put the attribute and it comes up automatically.
Yeah, that is because of the nature of our attribute. Yeah,
exactly, right. And in LWC, the code is definitely much simpler to read and to understand, even the JavaScript file. But the attribute goes into JavaScript because that's JavaScript thing, right? The property goes into JavaScript, and I see that there is not two-way binding, but actually one-way binding, one-way data flow in LWC. Versus Aura, which has two-way binding. So right. There are, I see that there are standards that are being followed in LWC, and if I look at it, it looks like any other web application, apart from Aura and Visual Force. So I have a question for Kush here. So why are we taking this kind of decisions for LWC?
It's a great question, Shashank, and I think Satya did a favor to all of us by writing the same thing in all the three frameworks. I think I would say that once you're betting on the standards, you're not learning anything proprietary. You're investing in yourself. Like if you look at the LWC example right there, there is nothing proprietary happening in this example. The same JavaScript eventing which you're used to in any modern JavaScript development, we are following the same things. You would see the property management is exactly the same thing. Whereas in Aura and the other example, you would see a lot of proprietary things are happening. So we want to give power back to the developers where like they can learn everything which is modern and not depend on any proprietary technologies which could hamper their career moving forward.
Absolutely, and there's actually these days there's actually no need to create all that in the framework because the web standards are much more powerful now.
Exactly,
we can take care of most of the things.
Exactly,
right? So we don't have to worry about all of that. Yeah, this is fantastic, and thank you so much, guys, for your amazing stuff. So I want to give you a heads up of the further episodes that we have in our series. We have 4 more episodes focused on Lightning Web Components. Episode 1, we saw an introduction, and then in episode 2, we are going to look at working with Salesforce data. And we actually just putting in the link that you can use to sign up for the second episode. And then you're also going to get an invite later as well. So you're getting an advanced link that you can sign up for right now. So in working with Salesforce data, we're going to talk about Lightning Data Service, where you don't have to write Apex to work with data, and how to work with Apex, and how to use our wire service that we created for Lightning Web Components in following the same standards that are needed, and how to use Lightning Web Components in the app builder, Lightning Experience, and Salesforce Mobile. And we'll also look at a little bit of how to debug JavaScript and HTML in the LWC, and also look at the concept of lifecycle hooks. That will take us to the next episode, in which we're going to talk about working with Aura and any other external resources. We will talk about component composition, interoperability, using other JavaScript libraries, and how to work with external APIs. So stuff that happens outside LWC. Right? And in our 4th episode, we're going to talk about communication and security, communicating between components and stuff, where we're going to talk about intercomponent communication, the pub-sub way of communication. We'll see a little bit, understand a little bit about the DOM and CSS, and also talk about one of the most important topics, which is security with the locker service. And then we'll go into our 5th episode, where we talk about migration strategies and testing. Now, when we say migrate, we're not saying you have to migrate all the components. But if you want to, there are best practices to follow. And also testing, right? Testing is a very important concept these days. Everything has to be unit tested, right? So how can you do testing for your Lightning Web Components? That is going to be covered in our last episodes. So our episodes are going to be spaced every 2 weeks away. So today we have episode 1, 2 weeks later we'll have episode 2, and so on until episode 5. So we look forward to seeing you in the future episodes as well. But in the meantime, I would also recommend you to go through our Trailhead content for Lightning Web Components. one most important thing is modern JavaScript development, because that is what we're betting on for UI development in Salesforce. So we actually have a trailhead module called modern JavaScript development, which will help you understand all these new concepts that you're hearing as Salesforce developer. ECMAScript, ES6 modules, decorators, imports, exports, and all these things, how this works, promises, all that modern JavaScript stuff that is being standardized more and more day by day. And also, we also have a trail mix, for which you can actually find a link right there, sforce.co/LWC. We tried our best to make it as simple as possible to remember. So just say sforce.co/LWC. You will get links to all the trailhead modules that we have for LWC. You'll get links to our component library, our sample gallery, the blogs that we're doing, the video gallery that we have created for small use cases inside LWC. You get all of that in this one single link. So with that, let us now go into our Q&A section. But before that, let me remind you that you can also feel free to join our Trailblazer community group, where you have a link for that, bit.ly/webinar in APAC, and we just put it in the chat as well. So feel free to join that to stay in touch with future webinars that we're doing. And with that, let's go into a round of Q&A. We got some amazing questions. Let's look at them and pick as many as possible from now. All right. Okay. So let's look at a few questions. So we're saying, is LWC still in beta, or is it matured enough to be used in production app? Kush, what do you say about that?
I would say it's completely matured enough. That's why we have GA'd it. I think to build up the confidence here, I'll tell you that all the 70 base components which you had in Aura, we have it in LWC. That is the biggest surface area we have. If we were not confident that LWC was not GA ready, then we wouldn't have released all our base components. Another thing which I will add is like a lot of our internal tools like Chatter and the tools which were performance heavy, we have converted it to LWC from Aura, and we are already seeing the benefits of performance right there.
Great. There's one more question around how do we use CSS in web components? You probably haven't seen it in the example or the slide. So Satya, what do we do about this?
So you can include the CSS just like how you have already done in your Aura framework there, and you can use the SLDS just like the same way. There are no differences for that matter.
To use it the same way you do in Aura, so you either just call the classes SLDS classes directly,
right,
or just create a CSS file with the same name in the bundle.
Yep.
Simple, right?
That's simple.
Sounds simple actually. Right. So going forward, will LWC be independent from Aura, or it would always coexist? The answer is coexistence. We want them to coexist and interoperate. That is a very, very high priority for us right now. Okay, so there is one more question around when a client comes up with a customization request, what should we suggest, Aura or LWC? And I know Kush has very good recommendations for this question.
I would highly recommend LWC for it, and it has multiple benefits for you and the client. Right, for you, the development cycle reduces a lot because the concepts are very easy to grasp, and like you can write the same component really fast. Testing is super awesome. In coming up episodes, we will go through testing, so you'll know more about that. And your client gets the awesomeness of performance because the same components which are written in LWC, everything is offloaded to the power of the browser. You would see the performance benefits.
Sounds good. So yeah, there is one basic question where I think it's important to address this. So what is the Lightning element import?
Yeah, import, we use import to import the modules which are already been defined. For us, at least to start with, to write the Lightning web components, we'll have to import the Lightning element mod from ICMA module. That's the import statement which we saw there. But we can, by using the comma operator, we can add more modules which you want to use there. For instance, in this episode where we're working with the very basic hello world component with the dynamic binding there. So we're using attract to create the reactiveness for the private property of a JavaScript file. Okay, so we have similar kind of modules there to connect to the Apex programming or if you want to make some event, like you want to send an event to the parent or child stuff, then we have the imports in a similar way, which we need to do, and then start working on those components.
All right, so there are some anatomy related questions. So we spoke about where can you add the CSS. You can just add it as a file within the bundle with the same name. So one more question is, can we have multiple JS files in the same LWC bundle?
So like Satya said, we are completely betting on the standard. So you can import any JavaScript library as ES6 module and start using that. So that is the power of ES6, and yes, you can use that.
Yeah, you can just have multiple files, give them names, and import them as modules.
Yes.
And they're there.
Yes.
Right. Standards, right?
Standards.
Okay. Let's see some more questions. And we spoke about, is LWC production ready? I think it is.
Yes.
Right? Well, because we spoke about that. All the base components that you're using, that you have been using in Aura, are already LWC for a while now.
Right.
And if LWC is not production ready, you would have not been able to use base components.
Right.
Right. So that was that. And what is the URL of Salesforce Playground? So all these links you will find in the trail mix that we shared previously. It's just salesforce.co/LWC. Okay, so let's look at how can we access component library. You can get it from the link, or you can just go to developer.salesforce.com, and you have links all over the website take you there. So don't worry about that. So how the communication is going to happen between Aura and Lightning Web Components. We're definitely going to talk about that in a future episode. Yeah. But in the meantime, anything you want to share at a high level?
Yeah, so the best thing is take a bite at a time. So we are going to talk about this intercomponent communication between the Aura and the Lightning for future. But yeah, you can use the same as I said. We can use the PubSub model there because that's the kind of which generates a application event to make these components talk to each other.
Sounds good. Okay, there is one interesting question around somebody asking, I'm currently working as a PHP web application developer, and I have good experience in front-end technologies. So I'd like to learn Salesforce into development job. Can you give us suggestions?
Yeah, so I believe in your previous slide, you were showing some Trailhead. So I'm a very big fan of Trailhead there. So if you are coming from some other technology where you are already more professional in the JavaScript, so this is the best time where you can start in. You can leverage all your JavaScript skills there and start learning Salesforce platform using our Trailhead resources. You have very basic modules to very advanced concepts which are provided using a super badge site stuff there. So you can start with your basic Trailhead module, and then probably you are there.
And Kush, that is also part of the LWC promise, right? So you're saying if you're a web developer and you have JavaScript skills, it's much easier for you to just work on LWC.
Exactly, and that is a big thing for us. Because one of the core things which we were hearing is like Aura development is awesome, but it's so hard to find Aura developers. But now we get people like this who have like really awesome background in web development, and now their world to Salesforce is open. So I really love this question.
Great. And there are questions around the tooling. So can developer console be used for LWC? Is VS Code the only way to write LWC? And can you talk about the editor inside VS Code? This kind of questions.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, yes. Right? So first, I'll answer the first part. Like, can developer console be used for the Lightning Web Components? I say no, because it's much beyond. And why VS Code? Why not other IDEs? In fact, you can use any of the IDEs of your choice. But VS Code comes with a lot of features which helps developers while they write the Lightning Web Components. They have the code completion, they have the debugging facility, and a lot of features that are there. And at first place, it is a lightweight IDE as well, right? So what would be more best than a lightweight IDE providing so many features? So that's the reason I suggest VS Code, but it's not necessary. It's up to you. Whatever you choose to use, you can use it.
Great. And there are questions around, can we get some sample use cases where we can practice and stuff like that? That can be taken care of by the sample gallery. So our sample gallery has live working examples. Maybe you can pretend that you didn't see the code and start to rebuild something like that, and then you can actually cross-check with the right code to see if you have done it right. So
Right,
sample gallery is an amazing place. We just put a link to the trail mix in the chat and salesforce.co/LWC. It will take you to this page where you have everything that you would need to start off with. Actually, more than what you would need to start off with LWC. Okay, so can we go to Lightning from Classic just by using LWC, or do we have to use Aura as well?
I think this is a great question, and like the best thing for this developer which has happened is LWC. Now the path from Classic to Lightning with LWC is super fast. So I will highly recommend that if you're moving from Classic to Lightning, use LWC. And there could be a scenario where like, hey, I was already in the journey, I've converted a couple of pages to Aura. Like, it's okay. Like, you can convert the rest of the pages to LWC because we guarantee that Aura and LWC will work seamlessly. Our basic recommendation is like, if you're starting something new, start it with LWC because you're going to get all the benefits of LWC in your journey.
Sounds good. I think we are at time for today's webinar. Thank you so much for posting all these amazing questions. You can, if we couldn't get to your question, please feel free to post them on the forums, and we'll see if we can answer the questions there as well. Please feel free to stay in touch with our webinars. The next webinar will be in a couple of Fridays from now, where we're going to talk about working with Salesforce data, and you can ask your questions there as well. With that, thank you so much, Kush, for coming all the way down from the US to share the LWC love with all of us. Thank you so much, Satya, for showing us these amazing demos that I love to see, and sharing all the resources that our developers can use.
Yeah, it was a great pleasure for me as well, Shashank.
Yep.
Same here. Thanks, Shashank. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you so much. Please feel free to fill the survey that you would get and let us know the feedback on what you thought about the webinar, what we can do better, what we have done well. And with that, thank you so much for everybody, and see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.